2021, as you know, has already been labeled an inevitable renaissance year on this program. I think it's going to be incredible. The 2021 college football show, we'll have a lot of shows, but the 2021 college football season, I think will be unlike anything that we've seen to this point in anyone's life, only because there are unique angles and a lot of different unique dynamics. But the 2021 season fits every box. It checks every box, no matter what kind of fan you are. In college football, we tend to have two kinds of fans. You've got what I call anglers, and then you got gamers. The angler crowd needs just that. They need an angle. They need something else. They need a little rub. They need a little storyline. And that's cool. So there'll be a lot of seasoning on this year's games for a lot of powerhouse programs. Now, the gamers, again, if they're keeping score, if there are lines on the field, if it's an organized 11-on-11, you're going to watch. Well, we'll have enough for all of you this year. Think about this. I'm going to run down a list of some powerhouse programs here and everything that could be on the line this year. I'm not talking about teams that went 6-6 last year or who are maybe just floundering under a brand new staff. These are mainstays. These are programs we talk about all the time, and they're at pivotal points. I stop short of saying crossroads or hot seat or anything like that. Every situation is unique. Most of these are perennial contenders. But just think about how different we're viewing these programs right now versus the way we could be viewing them in December or January, depending on how this year goes. Because I was thinking about this today, and I came up with one for Clemson, but then I came up with one for Oklahoma and Georgia and LSU and Florida, and I said, well, that's a segment, so let's do it. How about Clemson this year? Dabo has the exact combination he wants. He's got a world-class roster, and he's also got enough doubt. Now, doubt is relative because everyone's going to pick them to win the ACC. Everyone's going to pick them to make the playoff. A lot of folks are going to pick them to win the national championship. Dabo will find like 2 or 3 folks who don't and then plaster that all over his bulletin board in his locker room, and he'll have enough to fuel them from a disrespect and doubt standpoint for the entire year. I'm not crazy about that approach. I've well documented that on the show, but it'll be there. I'm not the head coach at Clemson. Dabo Swinney is. But I was talking to some people over the past week, and in the coaching world, in the recruiting world, just all across the spectrum of college football, there are some whispers about Clemson. The whispers are about potential vulnerability, because for a while they looked invincible. For a while it looked like they were about to supplant Alabama as the top program in the country, and it's not like they've fallen off or anything. But they've entered that different stratosphere. They've entered that stratosphere that only Alabama normally hangs out in, to where you get judged to this insane standard, and every year you don't win a title, the follow-up year is, or are they about to enter a drought period? Well, no, it's not a drought period, but here's what the whisper campaign consists of. Number one, it is, are they hitting at the absurdly high level from a recruiting and development standpoint that they were? So you watched every single kid come in there and develop to their maximum potential, and it just, people looked at it and said, is that sustainable? Are they really always going to have that high a hit rate? And, common sense says, no, eventually no. I don't think so, but we'll see. And then the second part of it is the sport's changing. So the very foundation on which you build your program, you have to constantly evolve because that foundation's changing. NIL didn't exist 5 years ago. It exists now. Not 50 years ago, 5 years ago. And so you've had some famous quotes by Dabo Swinney, horribly taken out of context recently, but nonetheless, they've been thrown around. And there was some off-field stuff last year, and make no mistake, for a program that's really hard to crack the veneer of, that stuff is used on the recruiting trail. And then the third part of that whisper campaign is just that. Is there a little slippage in recruiting? And fourthly, if you want to look at the potential for week 1 this year, and this is where the pivotal aspect of 2021 comes into play, think about where this season starts for Clemson. You don't respect their conference schedule. I don't either. The ACC will have to massively overachieve for them to have any kind of reputable or noteworthy strength of schedule in conference this year. But they open with Georgia, right there in Charlotte, NC, on Saturday night. September 4th, Colin? And we'll all be there, and you'll be watching if you're not there. And if they lose the game, here's how quickly things change. If they were to lose it by double digits, here's what it would sound like. Clemson can do all the damage they want to in the ACC, but the last 3 times I've seen them on the field with an elite power, it was LSU in a title situation 2 years ago, they got run. It was Ohio State in a semifinal situation last year, they got run. And now, lo and behold, they got another shot against Georgia, and they got run. At that point, in the minds of many, it will not matter what they accomplish the rest of the way. The one thing they focused on when they got run out of that building by Ohio State, Brent Venables, Dabo Swinney, what they said they were the most disappointed in is the toughness factor. It's been there, and all of a sudden it's not there. How do you get that back? Well, I don't know. It's intangible in nature, but yet there's some very tangible things you can do to get it back. Number one's have a lot of really, really good players. They have them. They were young last year. They got a little year's worth of seasoning on them this year. Just watch that, because you won't have to wait to the end of the year for that talking point with Clemson. That happens early on. Second team I want to focus on, the LSU Tigers. Now, this is the most easy breakdown out of this entire show and out of this entire season. If you are an agnostic college football fan, you don't have a team to root for, but you kind of like the sport, this is the one to follow this year. If we were going to put a documentary crew with one team this year, it's Ed Orgeron, it's LSU. This is the most unique team, and to me the most interesting team in college football in 2021, because it's the only one that I look at and say there is no ceiling on them. They're capable of winning a title. The talent level's that good. There's no floor here. If it goes bad, it could go horribly wrong. If they don't have a lot of the internals that were terrible last year fixed, it could go horribly wrong. No amount of talent can save you. Well, that makes for a very interesting season, whether you're a gamer or whether you're an angler. So we check all the boxes here. But understand how violently things changed. Just over a 365-day period. LSU fans know this. Plug your ears for 15 seconds. They go from walking in Bryant-Denny Stadium in 2019 and really just taking control of Alabama. They grabbed Alabama by the shirt, they rolled it up, and they put them on skates for 4 quarters. Very rarely do you see anyone do that to Alabama, period. But to go into Bryant-Denny Stadium and to just dictate terms, and then a year later have them come into Baton Rouge and paint the walls with your blood, that has a lot more to do with a football game and the outcome than just, oh, we lost this player here. Oh, we lost that player there. Well, they lost like 3 dozen of them. But there were internal dynamics that sucked. Get all that straight. Have Durante Jones, for example, be a grand slam hire as your defensive coordinator. Have a quarterback not only emerge, but take the job by the throat. And then you get that synergy. That synergy that you had in spades, buckets full of it in 2019 that you didn't have in 2020. You start to get that back. And then all of a sudden you look at LSU's schedule, as we're doing right now, UCLA. They'll be a small favorite in that game, 4 or 5 points, depending on where it closes at. They go to Mississippi State. They've got Auburn. They'll be a single-digit favorite in that game. They've got Florida. They'll be a single-digit favorite there. But the point is, they're going to be games where, from a point spread standpoint, you'll look at and you'll say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 losable games there before the bye week. But an LSU fan, that at Ole Miss, that's not a cakewalk either. But an LSU fan looks and says, if we look glass half full, if this team is maximizing its potential, we're undefeated November 6th against Alabama. The SEC West is yet again on the line November 6th against Alabama. So you see quickly what I mean when I say no floor, no ceiling. The Florida Gators are on the schedule for LSU. That is October 16th. So let's talk about Florida here. They did some good things last year, obviously. They beat Georgia. They won the East. They went to Atlanta. They did some horrific things last year, too, but this is not a 2020 year in review. I want to ask simply, Florida fans can answer this for me better than I can, because I'm asking you the question. Is 2020 the kind of year you can build on? Or, you know what, if you're not a Florida fan, now that we see in totality what 2020 consisted of, is that the kind of year you can build on? If I were to tell you last summer the things that were going to happen, you would certainly believe, well, they've thrust themselves right to the top of the East for the foreseeable future, yada, yada, yada. Well, circumstances dictate otherwise. And so here we are. They come in off a crushing disappointment to end the year, but then Dan Mullen had the famous quote that bent a lot of people the wrong way, me included, in the bowl game where he said, well, you know, this year's 2020 Gator team, they finished the season a couple of weeks ago in Atlanta. Okay, that's all well and good. Point being, 2021 now arrives, and there'll be a healthy amount of skepticism thrown Florida's way. I don't think nationally people are going to buy the concept that Emory Jones is going to light the world on fire, but yet he could, because Dan Mullen's done it before. In fact, multiple times Dan Mullen's done it. He has had quarterback talent overachieve relative to expectation. He specializes in that. But I want you to think about all the talking points around Florida. They're going to be down here. They're going to be down there. Offense is not going to be what it was last year. Defense, there's no reason to believe some quantum leap's going to be made. In fact, you could argue it's the least talented secondary they've had in a few years. But you say all that, and if I were to tell you they're going to split out of Bama and LSU, first portion of their schedule, they're going to split those 2 games and take care of business the rest of the way. Guys, the SEC East is still on the line again. when they play Georgia October 30th. It's really as clear-cut and as simple as that. So if Florida is again spiking or maximizing potential, and they even have room to lose a game early on, well, that's what it comes down to. The East has been no mystery as of late. That's usually what the situation is, and it could be that way again. So if that's the case, good for Florida. And I think you can let the chips fall where they may. If I were to tell you as a Gator fan, East is going to be on the line again in Jacksonville, you'll take your chances at that point because you think you got a game day advantage against Kirby Smart and Georgia. And I'm not going to sit here and argue with you necessarily, but you guys wholeheartedly believe that. You would take that. But what if you get to Jacksonville, and this is the negative side of the coin, this is the glass with 14 holes poked in it. What if the East is already decided for all intents and purposes by the time you get there? My point is, what if the potential just isn't there this year, and we get to the end of 2021, and you're looking around and you're saying Florida ran out of gas early November, and so what are we supposed to make of this program right now? I don't know what it would feel like. It would feel like a ship out in the middle of the ocean and the rudder's broken and you're just kind of at the mercy of the waves. I don't know if that's how it would feel. I'm guessing that's how it may feel. So let's hope for the first instead of the second. Oklahoma's fascinating. So Phil Steele puts out his magazine. I think he's got OU rated number 1. I'm going to have him way up there. I'm very high on Oklahoma. I did a segment about a month ago where I told you this is the first year where I feel like they're capable of truly winning a championship. There's a gulf in college football, a gulf between being a playoff contender and being a title contender. Even though the separation looks like it's only winning one more game, it's a lot different than that. You ask Notre Dame, for example, the difference between making the playoff and winning a national championship. This year is different for Oklahoma. So think about where the Sooners are. Okay, think about how the entire picture is starting to come into focus for Oklahoma. I'm a big believer that this is the first year Oklahoma's capable of winning a title. But here's the thing, I'm not alone there. And the reason that's important is because I don't know if you guys realize this, Oklahoma has not been held to a truly championship standard by the college football public. You think they have because they've been highly rated. They haven't. And let me tell you exactly what I'm talking about. If the University of Alabama were to lose to Kansas State 2 years in a row, what would the narrative be? And then think about the fact that Oklahoma has done it. You see, subconsciously, there's only one tier one in college football, and there's really only one or two teams that hang out there, and they get held to a different standard, understandably so, than anybody else in America. Oklahoma has not subconsciously been held to that standard yet. This point moving forward, they will. And so a lot of the stuff that you've kind of let slide because you just hadn't held them to quite that tier one lofty standard, that's the standard they're held to this year. It's the best team Lincoln Riley's had. People realize that. Alex Grinch has the defense he wants now, or at least needs to have, to compete for and maybe win a title. I agree with that. A lot of people agree with that. Well, what comes with that is pressure. It's a privilege to coach under that kind of pressure, but it's pressure nonetheless. You can't be losing to Kansas State. You can't be dropping games like that. You can't sit there and have your quarterback benched at halftime in the Red River Shootout. That kind of stuff flies when you're not held to a Tier 1 standard. When you're held to the T1 standard, it's a little bit different. It quite literally becomes championship or disappointment. It's not been the case for Lincoln Riley so far at Oklahoma. It will be this year. And so some things that would fly in the past will now be viewed as a disappointment. At Georgia, I do not believe in championship or bust with anyone, really, because bust would indicate failure, and then with Georgia, people, some of whom take the added 5 steps of saying bust equals hot seat. So beat Alabama, win a title, or hot seat for Kirby Smart. Well, of course, that's ludicrous, and we've already spelled that out in parade detail on the show. I believe Georgia will have a significant bump in offensive production this year. Having said that, what if they don't? Let's just entertain this for a second. What if you've watched them in Athens build to this, and they've acquired and assembled the talent? They've always had good offensive line talent, and they've had good mixtures of talent at receiver, but they've never had it across the board like they will this year. They've got 2 dominant forces at tight end. They're always set in the backfield at tailback. But now finally, what you and I have been told is the missing piece of that equation, quarterback, is finally answered. The blank is finally filled with JT Daniels, and so you are led to believe everything that's needed. All the ingredients for the meal that you've wanted to consume in the way of Georgia football for so long, they're all in the kitchen. What if it just doesn't pan out? What if they do stumble out of the gate against Clemson, and the talking point after that is, all right, got to regroup, lick your wounds, Nothing's lost. Everything's still on the table, but they really just never hit stride. Well, then it does get uncomfortable. I'm not talking hot seat or anything like that, but it does get uncomfortable for them because people are going to look, rightfully so, and they're going to say, well, if you didn't do it this year, when are you going to do it? You remember that? Because that's what they were saying about Florida this time last year. You know, Georgia's vulnerable. The schedule path is there. Dan Mullen's got his best collection of this and that, yada, yada, yada. And in some ways they achieved, and in other ways they faltered. Well, what if Georgia looks around and you've got an ultra-green Alabama offense, you got a new everything over in Tuscaloosa, Florida's got to play LSU and Bama. You don't have to play either of them. So you got a wide open path to Atlanta. You get a good test to begin the season. The team you theoretically would meet in Atlanta is going to be as vulnerable as they have been in a while. If you can't get it done with the boxes checked this year, they're going to ask, when are you ever going to get it done? So if you're demanding storyline on top of your college football, there it is. And lastly, all the way out on the West Coast at USC, this one's pretty simple, I think. It's just the Clay Helton job security factor, but if we dive a little bit deeper on that, are the elements there defensively that they need to be consistent? Because consistency is going to be the name of the day for Slovis at quarterback, obviously. But if you were to look, I was looking at Bill Connolly's S&P Plus ratings, and it's very confusing. On one hand, you see this quantum leap in defensive production last year. They went from, I think, 60th to like 29th in S&P Plus defense, but then they were 118th in tackle success rate, which essentially means this. It doesn't matter if you find where the freight train is if you hop in front of it and just get run over. So there are a lot of things, little tweaks I would call them, but things that are needed in terms of execution and better tackling on the defensive side. But then the other thing is, just from an overarching standpoint, I ask about USC, for better or for worse, are we just going to get a definitive answer this year with them? Because that's what USC fans keep talking about. I got a couple of buddies that talk about this all the time. They're Southern Cal fans, and they've gotten into that Kevin Sumlin territory. Once upon a time at A&M, they used to say the same thing, and it was, we're tired of floating in no man's land. No man's land for an elite college football program is 8 or 9 wins. It's not good enough for you. You expect more, but it's certainly not bad enough to make a move and get a new staff in there. And so the last thing Southern Cal fans want this year is an 8 or 9 win season. They either want to win the Pac-12 and be in the playoff, or they want the bottom to fall out, so there is absolutely no doubt what has to happen. So again, whether we're talking Clemson or LSU or Florida or Oklahoma, Georgia, USC, if it is a storyline you need, I got about 10 of them for every one of those programs. And again, these are the mainstay current modern-day blue blood programs in college football, and every single one of them, you get that little nervous, scratch the neck sort of feeling about, because it could turn out great. Every one of those teams I just mentioned, it could at least contend for a playoff spot, I would say. But it could go sideways for them, too. Really fun to watch. That is one of many reasons we love this sport.